is actually, if that sounded slightly strange, is Hillary Clinton being asked by talk show host Jimmy Kimmel to read out quotes by Donald Trump. So they were his words.
Right.
And she agreed to do that. And I know it's 2016, but does it seem like a bit of a circus when that is done? Do you associate... Oh, it's the US election.
It's not a bit of a circus, it's a complete circus.
It is an absolute circus. And he's getting so much attention, I think in New Zealand as well. It's a huge amount of attention, all the media. I mean, if we got nothing else to report on, I've had a couple of friends who've been over to the States recently and they said the lack of interest over here is, we're quite gobsmacked, and it appears that New Zealand media report more about Trump than what they saw over there.
And I'm starting to get Trump fatigue.
Oh,
Trump. Because, there's so many times you watch him be an idiot and you go, okay, he's an idiot. Now I'm actually over watching YouTube clips and Facebook clips of it. Are you not, Jim, yourself? Are you not over it a little bit?
Are you a bit over him being called simply, are you a bit over the sort of psychopath diagnosis?
Yeah, it's clear. He's an idiot, full stop. I mean, like, how many times do you need him to say outlandish things? And then, just don't be outraged by it. And if Americans were less outraged by it, they'd get less coverage and it would go away a lot quicker. I
want to ask you what was said to Eric Murray and Hamish Bond, according to their new book, seeing as we've got a coach with us. In The Kiwi Pair, Eric and his wife, Jackie, were called, it's said, to a meeting with Rowing New Zealand, high-level Rowing New Zealand people, to discuss Eric's desire to return home for the birth of his first child prior to the World Championships back in 2011. Quote, I was told I should be thinking about my career, not about having children. The decision to have a child would ruin my career. So all this is coming out from meetings he had with various individuals, which we don't have time to get into. But they're just various accusations. And I suppose controversy sells books. But in your view, should remarks made by coaches to those who coach, are they fair game or they stay private? What do you think?
Oh, because that's an administrator said that. And then there was also Dick Tonks, from what I read. They wanted a day off for something else and he went nuts at him as well. Oh, no, it's your life as well. He's not. No, I think that's a fair enough thing to say in a book. Yeah. It wasn't like this is something we should never ever speak of again. So please, can you have the confidence? It was.
Coaches must get intemperate at times. I mean, I'm sure you've raised your voice on the odd occasion.
Yep, for sure.
Would you like all that reported later, I suppose, is the question.
Do you know something? If you can't, if it doesn't come up to outside scrutiny, maybe you shouldn't have said it. I mean, that's the mirror you should put on yourself as a coach. If someone can't listen to my team talk and go, that was fair enough, that was reasonable. If they're saying, that was unreasonable, like an idiot, a dick, then maybe I shouldn't have said it.
Does that remove robustness?
No.
From that kind of...
No. If you have the people skills and the word skills, and just a presence, you can do it. And I tell you what, coaching females, the old school was when I was a male coach, or when I was coached by a male, it was effing and blinding. You're an idiot. You don't do it properly. You're a muppet. And other much stronger language than that. And the females, and rightly so, you would be extremely counterproductive to do that. It would backlash big time. So you have to be cleverer in the way you do it and less insulting. And that's actually not a bad thing at all.
So why would it backlash more with the women?
Because guys would get over it a lot quicker. In my anecdotally, guys would get it, and there's an expectation that guys actually in sporting teams are supposed to get yelled at. And if you yelled directly at a female, it would not be forgotten, perhaps ever. and I've got no research on that. That's just my anecdotal experience, and that's actually fine because it brings into sharp focus that you actually shouldn't have spoken to the guys like that either. You shouldn't have just laid into the expletives and stuff like that, because no one's been shouted at and humiliated into being a better player in any sport.
And speaking of females, the Eva Swindell twins, he was their coach, and I saw somebody quoting that they spoke very highly of him. So
a lot of people did. Oh, all right. That's all we've got time for. Nice to see you, Sally Winley.
Nice to see you too, Jim.
And you too, Andrew Clay.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, everybody. We're back tomorrow with the panel, and coming up, Checkpoints with John Campbell.
Kia ora everyone, I'm John Campbell. On behalf of our team, haere mai, welcome to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Tau te maira, e hoa mā, he kōrero kei te haere, he kaupapa kei te karawhiua. Tonight, the woman who survived 27 nights alone on the Routeburn track after her companion's death. The death toll has climbed to more than 240 and hundreds are still feared trapped. After yesterday's 6.2 magnitude quake in Italy, shops can now open their doors legally on Easter Sunday in NZ. Havelock North's water crisis gets murkier. The Hawke's Bay Regional Council puts the Hawke's Bay District Council on notice. An extraordinary letter, we have it here. Helen Kelly speaks to us from Cuba, where she's travelled to take part in a medical trial. Some relief for debt-laden dairy farmers after Fonterra raises its forecast payout. And the recipient of one of the world's most extensive face transplants after that groundbreaking surgery. All of that and more in the next 89 minutes. But first, Katrina Batten with RNZ News.
Kia ora, good evening. The families of two men killed when their helicopter broke up in mid-air and crashed in bush near Queenstown say the make of aircraft should not be flying in New Zealand. The Transport Accident Investigation Commission has released a report into the crash of the Robinson R44 helicopter in February last year, which killed pilot Stephen Combe and James Patterson Gardner. Sally Murphy reports.
The report says the main rotor blade struck the cabin in what's known as mast bumping, causing the helicopter to break up in the air. But investigators could not determine why the mast bumping happened in the first place. The Commission says this makes it a serious safety issue that the industry needs to address. The report recommends cockpit video recorders be installed in certain classes of helicopter to help establish the cause of crashes in the future. The victims' families say despite the Civil Aviation Authority introducing stricter rules for the Robinson R44, it should not be certified to fly. This is Sally Murphy.
A woman who survived in a hut on the Routeburn track for several weeks after her partner died was not able to walk out due to her injuries. The police, along with the Department of Conservation staff, have briefed media in Queenstown in the past hour about the survival efforts of the Czech woman who spent a month in the Lake Mackenzie hut. She was rescued yesterday afternoon. She and her companion began walking the track on July 24th and he fell down a steep slope 4 days later and died. Inspector Olaf Jensen says the woman wasn't discovered earlier because no one had been through the hut. He says she told police that due to the severe weather and her physical capabilities, she decided it was safer to stay in the hut. Mr. Jensen says the woman made the right decision. Attempts are still being made to retrieve the man's body. Regional officials say the death toll following the earthquake that rocked central Italy has risen to around 250 as rescue workers through the night in an attempt to find more survivors under the rubble. The strong 6.2 magnitude quake razed homes and buckled roads in a cluster of mountain communities east of Rome. Many people remain unaccounted for. The ABC's Lisa Miller is in the town of Amatrice.
It is pitch dark now. There are lights that have been put up by the rescue crews and they are still flooding in here. Hundreds of army and firefighters and police, and they plan on working through the night, hoping that even now, so many hours after the earthquake, that they are going to be able to find some survivors in these homes. But the town that I'm in right now, Amatrice, is the streets are demolished. It is quite a scene.
Lisa Miller reporting. The mother of Rotorua girl Nia Glassy, who was killed in 2007, has been recalled to prison because she's an undue risk to the safety of the community. Lisa Kuka was paroled in September 2014 while serving a 9-year sentence for the 3-year-old's manslaughter. The Corrections Department says Kuka breached her parole by living at an unapproved address. Corrections says she also breached the condition of not living with a child or having a child stay overnight. As a formal investigation is launched into the poisoning of more than 4,000 Havelock North people by contaminated water, the Hastings District Council says it still believes the town's water bores are secure. The Hawke's Bay Regional Council has launched a formal investigation into whether the Havelock North water bores were not secured properly and allowed contaminated water to enter the aquifer. The Regional Council says while samples suggest surface water has somehow infiltrated the town's water supply. The District Council's Chief Executive, Ross McLeod, says he welcomed independent scrutiny of the bores.
Up till now, we understand that the Boers have passed all of the things they needed to pass in the previous sort of inspection regime for them. So no, we don't think there's necessarily anything new in here, but certainly this is work that needs to be done.
Ross McLeod, the Chief Executive of the Hastings District Council. Parliament has passed legislation that'll make it legal for shops to trade on Easter Sunday if their local councils agree. The country's Easter trading laws have been a source of great frustration, with some tourist centres being allowed to trade and others not. This afternoon, MPs voted 62 to 59 in favour of the law change. The Workplace Relations Minister, Michael Woodhouse, told Parliament a large and growing number of events were being scheduled over Easter, such as Warbirds over Wanaka. Mr Woodhouse says it will now be up to local communities whether they open on Easter Sunday. In sport, the All Blacks' newest camp, 21-year-old Anton Leonard-Brown, says he's desperate to make the most of his starting role against Australia on Saturday. The second 5'8" has got the nod ahead of his Chiefs teammate Seta Tamanivalu to debut alongside centre Malakai Fekitoa in the second Bledisloe Cup test in Wellington. Leonard-Brown admits it's a big step up and he's both nervous and excited.
I've talked to a few of the boys and the coaches and things, but I think it's pretty basic, like I said before, just trying not to get too overwhelmed by the occasion and making sure it's a special one and I make the most of the opportunity.
If the All Blacks win, they'll extend their dominance in the Bledisloe Cup to 14 straight years. Meanwhile, the Wallabies under fire coach Michael Cheika has restored Quade Cooper to the lineup for Saturday's test. He gets the nod ahead of the Waratahs playmaker Bernard Foley, who's given the number 12 jersey, replacing the injured Matt Giteau. New Zealand's top tennis player Marina Ivrakovic has failed to make the US Open main draw after losing her opening match in qualifying. She was beaten by China's Yafan Wang in 3 sets, while wildcard Ruben Statham also lost his first qualifying match in straight sets to Ducky Lee from South Korea. That's the news.
A seismic shock.
It felt like somebody was taking the house and slamming it up and down. It was just indescribably violent and it was really loud.
Trapped in rubble.
There's nothing left standing. I'm so sorry for so many people that are under the rubble. They are people I love.
The aftermath.
I tried to hide myself underneath the bed, and then I went outside to ask help.
At the epicentre, Guy Espiner and Susie Ferguson morning reports, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, the US energy company successfully turning wastewater into electricity. And after 1,000 years as the world's most powerful medium, does the book still reign supreme? Join me, Lynn Freeman, and for Catherine Ryan after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. For the North Island, periods of rain with some heavy falls in the north, easing in most places tomorrow. Strong or gale northwesterlies north of Hamilton at times. Nelson, Buller, Marlborough and Canterbury, mostly cloudy. Rain developing tomorrow morning, persistent in the east. For Westland and Fiordland, remaining areas of rain clearing, however rain developing north of the glaciers tomorrow. Otago and Southland fine at first, apart from some rain about central Otago. Areas of fog tonight and tomorrow morning, rain spreading inland tomorrow afternoon or evening, with snow to 800 metres in central Otago. The Chatham Islands cloudy with rain developing tomorrow morning. It's 5:09.
Thanks, Katrina. Italy in a moment. The official death toll now well over 200. And then to Havelock North, we have a striking letter from the Regional Council to the District Council on the table beside me. We will talk about that shortly. But we begin with the extraordinary story of a young Czech woman who survived almost a month in a dock hut on the Routeburn track after the death of her companion. The woman was only discovered yesterday after the Czech consulate raised concerns with the police. Where were they? It's understood her travelling companion fell to his death down a steep slope just 2 days after the couple set off on the 3-day tramp on July 26th. A short time ago, the Otago Lakes Central Area Commander, Inspector Olaf Jensen, explained how the woman was found.
Yesterday we were advised by the Czech consulate of 2 missing trampers in the Routeburn area. The 2 were a male and female Czech citizens. We commenced some initial inquiries at the Routeburn car park of Gnorki End and found a vehicle belonging to the missing couple. As a result of that, we initiated a SAR operation involving police and Landsar personnel. involving the use of a helicopter which flew the Rootburn track, checking huts and areas of high risk around avalanche. At the Mackenzie hut, we located a female, and on speaking to her, we ascertained that her male companion had died some days earlier. The couple had set off on their journey on the 26th of July, and would appear the incident where a fall has taken place occurred on the 28th. After that, the female has spent a number of nights in the open before she was able to make it to the Mackenzie hut on the 31st of July, and has spent the remaining time at that hut. As in previous media statements, it's obviously a very unusual case given the length of the time that the female was at the hut. It's probably been unhelpful, some of the commentary about why she wasn't found. The fact is that no one had been through the hut that time, and given the severe weather conditions and her physical capability as a result of the ordeal, that she was not able to make it out, and made the right decision in staying put at the hut until rescue.
That's Area Commander Olaf Jensen speaking a short time ago. The woman was discovered yesterday in the Mackenzie hut on the Rootburn track. We're going to find more about that area shortly. But Doc's Wakatipu Operations Manager Jeff Owen is on the phone live from Queenstown. You there, Jeff?
Yeah, good afternoon, John.
Hi, John. Hi, Jeff. Lovely to talk to you. Thank you for joining us. Lots of uncertainty around this, but let's clarify some things. Doc very definitively closes the Rootburn track over winter, and the huts are locked. That's right, isn't it?
Oh, perhaps, John, if I could first say, it's been a tragic incident, and I and my staff and the department, we certainly are thinking for the young lady that's been recovered, and our condolences with her and the young man that has lost his life and their families. So they're pretty much to the fore of our thoughts right now. But just in terms of your question, no, we don't close the track. It is a great walk, as we all know, during the summertime, which is generally October to April. But what we do is we winterise it. We don't actually close it right down. So it just changes its status. It means we don't have huts. We don't service our huts. We don't have hut wardens on the track over that the winter period.
So was the hut locked, and did this woman have to break into it?
Where she was in the Mackenzie, I guess there's a choice of three that she would have found. There's our hut warden hut, which is separate of our public hut, and they are separate again of Ultimate Hikes, who have a lodge on the track in the same place. Our public hut would have been open. We leave those open, but our warden's hut would have not. And I'm accepting that she found her way into that.
Okay. How is she? First of all, obviously shattered because she's lost her partner, and there is the traumatic and terrifying experience of waiting for a rescue that obviously she thought was going to come much more quickly. So, traumatised. What's her physical health like?
Look, John, I haven't actually had the opportunity to meet and talk with her. I know Olaf did comment earlier this afternoon. Given her ordeal and the amount of time she spent out there, she's in, one might say, remarkable condition. So I guess the good thing is that she is alive, she is with us, she is on a recovery path, and we are certainly doing our best to support her as she gets through these next few days.
Yeah, quite a difficult thing to do, because she's Czech speaking with little or no English. Do you have any Czech speakers down there?
We have the Czech consul, who just happens to be in Queenstown as well. But for us ourselves, we don't have Czech-speaking staff. And I guess this is just the continual challenge with the number of international visitors we get to the region.
Where is she at the moment? Where is she being cared for?
Oh, look, I don't want to say, John, but she is being well looked after by the local community, and we're just waiting for, I guess, her family to make arrangements to come and support her as well.
Right, the local community, that's lovely. So she's not in hospital, she's been cared for in someone's home?
Yes, no, she was checked last evening in hospital, and I guess given the best bill of health that she could receive at the time, and now being well looked after locally.
This Lake Mackenzie area sounds beautiful. I've never been there. We're about to talk to Emma Lang, who's going to tell us all about it. But What sort of communications can you get out of there? Are there radios in any of the huts you talked about? Is there any way of getting a message to the outside world?
Certainly no cell phone coverage in that space, and that's always the risk with this wilderness area. We do have radios in our hut wardens' huts, and because we need those for the summer, but they wouldn't be easy for, I guess, a novice or any individual to be able to operate. And also bearing in mind, we do winterise these huts, so we pretty much shut them down until sort of September, maybe later in September, October, when we start to open up the track for the summer season.
So, Jeff, there was a radio of some description in this hut?
Generally, our huts do carry radios. That's the ones we have our wardens in. And naturally, when they're also working the route burn, they'll be carrying personal radios as well. So that's how we support the walkers and the trampers over the summer period.
Jeff Owen, who's DOC's Wakatipu Operations Manager. Thanks, Jeff. We appreciate your time tonight. The route burn track is described by the DOC website as the ultimate alpine adventure, but obviously much safer in summer. Emma Lang worked as a guide on the route burn track for 10 years and was on the track just 4 days ago. I asked her to tell me about the Lake Mackenzie area where the hut is.
It sits in a hanging valley, John, so it's sort of very enchanting. It's quite a magical place, actually, Lake Mackenzie. It's not very far from the road end, but it's a wee bit of a hike in. It's sort of about 4.5 hours to get in there, but you have to climb up into this hanging valley and sort of drop down into the hut, and it's right beside an emerald lake, and it's an amphitheatre of mountains, and it is really, really stunning. It's no wonder it's a very, very popular destination, John. It's hugely popular because it's actually very accessible. Loads and loads and loads of people walk the route burn. You probably have. But there is, I guess, a defining difference between the route burn in summer and getting into Lake Mackenzie in summer, which is very straightforward, great track, great infrastructure, and winter, which is a different beast altogether. I was actually just up there on Sunday, not to Lake Mackenzie, but the other end of the route burn, and there was a lot of snow. There is this time of the year, which makes it a very different prospect. Actually.
And if there's snow, there's ice, and does the track become slippery and dangerous? Because the route burn is regarded as fairly benign in terms of walking conditions over summer, but over winter, does that just change materially?
Yes, I think it does. I've been through there many times, many times in winter as well as summer, and the track does cut through a lot of avalanche paths. You've really got to have the skill set, John, to know how to manage a track in winter, which is why they closed it, why DOC put the clothesline up in winter, because you do have to have the confidence. You've got to have, the knowledge about how to move through snow. It could be icy. It's very, very possible that you'd have to negotiate a small avalanche or some ice, or you've got to have your wits about you, definitely.
So what's your take on this, Emma, from what little we know so far? Is it possible that what has been described is exactly what happened?
Yes, I would believe that a person would, and it's obviously just supposition, but I could see someone staying put, being very intimidated by that place and not feeling confident and feeling in shock, feeling grief. You know, I think seeing something like that, losing a partner, there is a paralysis that goes with that. So you could think, all right, what's the best thing to do? Go nowhere. And I'm in a hut, great. I would suggest that, she has just stayed put and in the hope that someone will come along. But that's where my theory does unravel, as does many people's, because you do travel through. People do travel the route burn in winter time. I was there on Sunday, but only to a small degree. So it's a nice challenge to people to go through. Why wouldn't she be seen? What stopped her from, finding someone else? That's a real grey area, actually, for me. But we'll find out in due course, no doubt.
Emma Lang, who was a guide on the route burn for many years. To Italy now, where the death toll from yesterday's 6.2 magnitude quake has risen to well over 200. In fact, the BBC is reporting Italian sources are saying the number is 240 and climbing. Somewhere approaching 100 of the dead are in the historic town of Amatrice, but hundreds more are still missing, feared trapped in debris in nearby hilltop towns and villages. As Alex Ashton reports, a combination of historic buildings and mountainous conditions means it's a race against time to save lives.
Last year, it was voted one of Italy's most beautiful historic towns. Today, drone footage captures the devastation. Homes razed, buckled roads. The town of Amatrice is almost unrecognisable after yesterday's powerful 6.2 magnitude quake shook the earth in the middle of the night. Its most famous hotel, Hotel Roma, was estimated to be hosting 70 guests, but just 7 bodies have so far been recovered. Most of them feared buried alive in their sleep. It's the height of the tourist season, and there are fears for hundreds of others still missing. Beneath the rubble, a trapped survivor is urged to stay calm until rescuers can get to her. She says she can breathe, but only just. Entire mountainous villages across Umbria, Lazio and Marche have been destroyed. As aftershocks hit, survivors wandered the streets waiting for rescue teams to arrive. This man chokes up as he describes the aftermath.
As we got out, we saw all the people outside. They were shouting and crying.
Residents sifted through the rubble with their bare hands to rescue their neighbours before emergency services arrived with heavy machinery and sniffer dogs. Survivor Giancarlo says he felt helpless.
I heard people asking for help, people calling out, asking for help. But in this condition, what could I do? I've been to the centre and it's all in rubble.
Italy's Prime Minister, Matteo Renzi, has already toured Amatrice, and a makeshift tent city's been set up to house the homeless. On national television, he pledged more than 400 million in emergency funds and said the priority was to get survivors out of the rubble. He vowed no area or family would be left behind. In the nearby town of Arcata del Tronto, people slept in tents or under the open sky last night, amid fear of aftershocks. Italy's Earthquake Institute reported 150 in the 12 hours following the quake. This woman still has a house, but she won't return to it.
There's no way I will step foot in my house, even if nothing has happened to it. I'm too scared.
Speaking to tens of thousands of people gathered in St. Peter's Square, Pope Francis thanked rescue workers and volunteers and urged the country to pray for the victims of the quake. 6 of the Vatican's 37 firefighters have travelled to Amatrice to help in the search for survivors.
I
cannot fail to voice my great pain and my closeness to all the people that are in the areas hit by the earthquake, and to all the people who have lost their loved ones, and those who still feel moved by fear and terror.
E a quelle che ancora si sentono scosse dalla paura e dal terrore.
The Italian army and volunteer firefighters have been mobilised to boost rescue efforts. But this is mountain country, and saving lives is becoming a race against time. For Checkpoint, Alex Ashton.
Coming up to 24 minutes past 5. Next on the program, we go to Havelock North. We've also got Parliament passing legislation that will make it legal for shops to trade on Easter Sunday. Helen Kelly is joining us from Cuba, where she's taking part in a medical trial for a new form of lung cancer treatment. Much more coming up. We'd love to hear from you in any way you choose. Feel free, please, to text us on a 2101, email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz, contact us on Twitter @checkpointrnz, or via our very busy Facebook page. However you get in touch, we do like hearing from you. Thank you. What caused the water contamination that made so many people sick in Havelock North? Well, this letter from the Hawke's Bay Regional Council to the Havelock North to the Hastings District Council formally states it's undertaking an investigation into the Havelock North bores. But the letter goes further than that. Using the phrase very concerned, the letter states the council has information indicating the Brookvale bores, quote, may be in breach of consents and conditions. One of the possible consent breaches the letter specifies is, and I quote, leakage from the ground surface into groundwater. Now that matches the theory that surface water contaminated with faeces from ruminant animals made its way into the bore. Checkpoint has repeatedly asked the Hastings District Council for evidence that the contaminated bore is sealed and is not admitting surface water or shallow groundwater. It has not been provided to us. We have not even been told if tests have been done to ascertain that. Now the Regional Council is asking the same thing. The letter was written by the Regional Council's interim CEO, Liz Lambert.
A week and a bit on, we've now got a much better picture, really, of what the results are showing us, and it's really it's telling us two things. It's telling us that there is no widespread E. coli contamination in the groundwater aquifers, and secondly, it's telling us that the most likely source is very localised to the Havelock North water supply bores. So we have, as part of our own investigations, determined that we need to be able to look at the bores to determine whether or not they have been, their integrity has been compromised in any way.
So what are you saying? You're saying those bores are in breach of the resource consent under which they exist? Is that what you're saying?
No, we are saying that we want to determine whether or not those bores are in breach of the consent conditions under which they were issued.
But prima facie, Appendix 1 suggests that you think they are.
Well, there's certainly a level of evidence to lead us to want to investigate it further.
Sorry, can you elaborate for me? Do you believe there is water in the bore that has been the source of the contamination that has made 4,500 people sick in Havelock North, which has come in recently from the surface?
I believe that our investigation will be able to provide a definitive answer to that.
If this is surface water that has somehow made its way into the bore, contaminated by fecal matter from ruminants nearby, that lets the Hawke's Bay Regional Council off the hook of the bigger discussions around water quality in this area, doesn't it? Is that convenient for you?
What we're looking at here, and the only purpose of this investigation, is to get to the bottom of the source of the contamination, John. We are aware, probably very acutely, of the impact it's had on the Havelock North community and, in fact, on the wider regional community. Our focus has been, since day one, on getting an answer to the question, what has caused the contamination of the Havelock North water supply, as indeed has Hastings District Council's focus as well.
And what do you think the answer is? Your letter strongly suggests you think the answer is local contaminant from surface water that has recently entered the bore.
Our evidence to date is that the source is localised, and rather than as part of widespread contamination of the aquifer. Any further speculation other than that, I'm not prepared to make because we will be waiting for results.
Liz Lambert, you'll remember last night on Checkpoint we asked two questions of the Hastings District Council, whether it put cameras down to check the integrity of the bores and if it was concerned about the proximity of large numbers of livestock to the bore heads. We asked those questions yesterday morning. We're still waiting. We've invited Mia Lawrence-Yule onto the program. He's been very forthcoming with his appearances on Checkpoint so far, and we do hope to hear from him later in the program. Parliament has finally passed legislation that will make it legal for shops to trade on Easter Sunday if their local councils agree. The country's hodgepodge Easter trading laws have been a source of great frustration for many, with some tourist centres being allowed to trade and others not. Parliament has failed time and time again to pass proposed laws to remove the Easter trading discrepancies. This afternoon, MPs voted 62 to 59 in favour of the Shop Trading Hours Amendment Bill. Here's our political reporter, Demelza Leslie.
The Workplace Relations Minister, Michael Woodhouse, says the current shop trading exemptions are arbitrary and outdated. He says they do not reflect what most New Zealanders want over the Easter weekend period. Mr Woodhouse told Parliament a large and growing number of events were being scheduled over Easter, such as Warbirds over Wanaka.
This event draws large crowds from New Zealand and around the world. The inability to even have a choice about doing a bit of shopping around these events is outdated and out of line with the choices people want to be able to make.
Mr Woodhouse says it should be up to local communities whether they open on Easter Sunday, not Parliament. But the Labour MP Ian Lees-Galloway said the government was being gutless in passing the contentious issue to local councils.
This government, which is so fond of saying to local government that they have to focus on their core responsibilities, that they have to stop increasing rates, that it's always the local government's fault for anything that the government doesn't want to take responsibility for, is passing the buck on an issue which is fundamental to the role of the New Zealand Parliament.
National's Melissa Lee said the legislation was about empowering local communities.
Rotorua cannot trade on Easter Sunday at the moment, whereas the neighbouring town, Taupo, can. And so Rotorua will be celebrating this. And I think it is wonderful that we're giving power back to local communities to decide for themselves if they want to actually trade on Sunday.
Traditionally, MPs are allowed a personal vote on legislation like this, but National made its MPs vote along party lines. Labour's Porter Williams said that would have been distressing for National's Pacific MPs, and she pleaded with them to cross the floor.
Having had numerous conversations with the Honourable Sam Lutawinga and with Alfred Nuttall about the depth of their faith, and I know the depth of their faith, and I know they are feeling distress. They are getting pressure from the Pacific community. So I ask them, examine your conscience, cross the floor and vote with us.
A last-ditch effort by Pacific communities asking the National Party to let its MPs have a conscience vote also failed. The well-known boxer David Tua travelled to Parliament to make his plea.
There's always hope. Our brothers on that side, be courageous and, do it for our families.
The decision on whether cities and towns will open their shops on Easter Sunday will now be up to councils. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Demelza Leslie.
Coming up on Checkpoint, some relief for debt-laden farmers after Fonterra raises its forecast payout. Helen Kelly in Cuba, and the Christchurch Council and sea level rise warnings on property reports. All of that and more coming up. But first, Katrina Batten with RNZ Headlines.
A woman who survived in a hut on the Routeburn track for a month after her partner died was not able to walk out due to her injuries. The police, along with the Department of Conservation staff, have briefed media in Queenstown in the past hour about the rescue of the Czech tramper. Inspector Olaf Jensen says the woman made the right decision to stay in the hut. The man's body has yet to be recovered. The families of two men killed when their helicopter broke up in mid-air and crashed in bush near Queenstown say the make of aircraft should not be flying in New Zealand. The Transport Accident Investigation Commission has released a report into the crash of the Robinson R44 helicopter in February last year, which killed pilots Stephen Combe and James Patterson Gardner. The report says the main rotor blade struck the cabin, but it's not known why that happened. Regional officials say the death toll following the earthquake that devastated central Italy has risen to about 250 as rescuers work through the night in an attempt to find more survivors under the rubble. Many people remain unaccounted for. The mother of murdered Rotorua girl Nia Glassie, who was killed in 2007, has been recalled to prison because she's an undue risk to the safety of the community. Lisa Kuka was paroled in September 2014 while serving a 9-year sentence for the 3-year-old's manslaughter. Corrections says she breached her parole conditions. As a formal investigation is launched into the poisoning of more than 4,000 Havelock North people contaminated by water, the Hastings District Council says it still believes the town's water bores are secure. The Hawke's Bay Regional Council has launched a formal investigation into whether the Havelock North water bores were not secured properly and allowed contaminated water to enter the aquifer. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6 with more news, sport and weather.
Thanks, Kashween. Let's go to business news now. Our business editor, Giles Beckford, joins us live from Wellington. Hi, Giles. Boy, it's company earnings season, isn't it?
It is indeed. Evening to you, John. Yes, we had another flurry of them again today. Probably the standout was EBOS. Now, that's EBOS. It's one of those companies that you've probably never heard of, and then when I tell you what they do, you go, oh, it's them. And in this case, they own the Animates pet centres and the vets shops. They own the Red Seal health food company and the products that they sell. They have a wholesale pharmaceutical business in New Zealand and Australia, and they own also retail pharmacies in Australia. So they're a company that's in the jargon they call them vertically integrated. They like to get businesses at the wholesale level or products at the wholesale level, and then they put them through their own retail outlets. Now the thing about EBOS is that it's been on a big expansion trail over the past 4 or 5 years. It's got a real knack of finding businesses that fit. It has a knack of putting these businesses into the group, making sure that the connections are all there, and then it gets excellent growth out of them and good earnings. And if you're a shareholder in them or your KiwiSaver has them in the portfolio, you'll be laughing. They've had double-digit growth for the past 3 or 4 years. They increased their dividend by 1/3 this year to more than 50 cents for the full year payout. And on that basis, you have to say that they are a real winner. And they've got a couple of acquisitions in the pipeline, which they're working on as well. So we can expect more good things from them. The thing I like about the company, apart from that it just gets on and does it, is that they're not flashy. There's no big corporate gigs. There's no big presentations to try and sell themselves. They're not hogging headlines. They just get on and do it, in a good Kiwi way. And that's one of the reasons why they're very successful, I think.
Yeah, boy, I hadn't heard of them. Anyone else, Giles?
Well, Hellaby Holdings. Now, those of you who are old enough will remember that the old Hellaby's was in fact connected to the meat trade.
Yeah, absolutely.
But no longer. They morphed themselves during the 80s and 90s into an investment company. They own auto repair shops and auto part retailers, and they go out there and they fix oil rigs and oil wells in the Middle East. And they've got shoe shops. I mean, whoever bought the shoe shops for them must have had a really Imelda Marcos moment, because they just don't fit with anything else in the group. They've been money losers. They've been trying to get rid of them for ages. We thought they were going to make an announcement today. They said to us that they probably were. There's a plan on the block, so keep an eye on your Hannah's shoe shop, or the Number One Shoes is the other one that they've got. There might be a few bargains coming your way pretty soon.
Some Fonterra reaction today on the markets after their payout was lifted, Giles.
Indeed. It's a psychological thing, really, because the money won't be, assuming that, of course, the payout forecast is sustained, and there's a lot of auctions to go and a lot of product to be sold between now and the end of the season. Assuming it's sustained, then it will bring a lot of farmers up towards the break-even point. It's about $1 billion, close to $1 billion being pumped into the economy. So that, of course, lifted the currency. It's one of those double-edged swords. The better that they do, of course, then the US dollar, then the New Zealand against the US dollar goes up, as it did today, around 73.2. That just takes the edge off, of course, the export earnings, but not too bad. We're just under 96 Australian cents as well. And the share market, I can tell you, had a more modest rise today. 15 points it was, and it's at 7427. And it's worth bearing in mind the share market is up 17% so far this year. And who would have thought that after the kicking that it got at the beginning of the year?
Yeah, quite remarkable. Giles Beckford, our business editor. Thanks, Giles. It's 22 minutes to 6. Former CTU head Helen Kelly is in Cuba having treatment for her terminal lung cancer at the La Pradera Medical Centre. As it's in Cuba, La Pradera exists outside the tests and prescriptions of the FDA. The efficacy of its treatment simply isn't established in ways accepted in the West. But, and this is an anecdotal but, not peer-reviewed, not clinically tested outside Cuba, a meaningful number of the patients using its treatment appear to be doing better than patients with advanced lung cancer otherwise do. And an American application to the FDA is pending, asking permission to test the drug there on a 70-patient trial in the US. But for Helen Kelly, given only weeks to live more than weeks ago, the opportunity to participate in a Cuban trial of this drug was not one she felt she could turn down.
And I had to see those today, and it's been, especially offered to me, which I'm very grateful for, and a number of people are here trialling it. And yes, I had 4 injections of it today, and that was the first treatment, and I'm hoping to get another one in 14 days' time.
And it's a form of immunotherapy, is it? How does it work?
Yeah, it works very similar to the immunotherapy drugs that have been promoted in New Zealand. And because I've got a very unique type of cancer growth, this is one that seems to have a more positive response. It's not a cure at all. There isn't a cure for lung cancer, but everybody that's taken this drug has had some success with it, some of it quite short, 3 months, but some of it longer than a year, which for me is a long time. And it's taken a while because of the long trip, obviously, and we've been trying to bring it back to New Zealand, have it administered there. We may still be able to do that with the rest of the program. They're just getting all the information. It was hard to get out of here, so we've sort of been asking questions and sending it back. And we're hoping to hear in a few days whether I can bring the rest back to New Zealand and finish the program there, which would be fantastic.
And so you had to trek from New Zealand up to... How did you get into Cuba? Where did you fly?
We went to Houston and then to Cancun in Mexico, and then flew over here. But I have to say the embassy in New Zealand was incredibly helpful at all of that stuff. So it wasn't hard. The big decision, of course, was whether to come, whether it's worth it. And I guess I weighed up the side effects with the treatment results so far and thought, why not? It's my last ditch, really. It does seem extravagant, but people do this, right, when they get to this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone listening knows why you did it, really. It's worth a shot, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it is worth a shot. And also, it's too hard to say it's not worth a shot. Especially if you're your family and stuff, to say, I'm not going to give it a go. When you know there's not side effects, when, that it's being offered and it's got some quite unique results, it's too hard to just say, look, I'm out of here.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so you've had the first round of treatment, and do you have to wait 14 days for the second round, do you? So are you potentially there for a couple of weeks?
Well, we could be here. If we can't bring it back to New Zealand, we could be here for the whole treatment, which could be, 12 to 15 weeks, really. Our preference would be to get it back. It won't be that we won't be allowed it back. It's just that we can't get anybody to administer it there. And I don't blame people for that, because it is an experimental drug and they've got to get ethical approval. They've got to do various things. But, it's certainly been quicker and easier than trying to get medical cannabis legalised, I can tell you that.
Yeah. Who are you up there with, Helen? Who have you gone with? Who's looking after you?
My husband's here.
Yay.
I got married this year, so I can call him my husband now, can't I? I'm getting used to the idea. He's here looking after me. I couldn't do it on my own, mate. It's hard work being sick. Everybody who's sick knows that, Even just getting off the chair is hard work. So it's really lovely to have him here.
Yeah, and Cuba, it's beautiful, is it? I've never been there, but is it? I mean, it must be quite magic, setting aside the appalling circumstances, but just being there together, is it lovely?
You wouldn't complain, would you? You might complain about the circumstances, but you wouldn't complain about being here for a few weeks. It's totally gorgeous. Although I have to say we haven't left the compound yet because they've been treating me and want me to stick around. But tomorrow we have to go into Havana proper and have a look around.
And is it sunny and warm?
It's boiling. It's beautiful. So swimming in the afternoon, we're already getting into a routine, Eat lunch, go for a swim, pretend it's exercise, pretend it's good for you.
It is.
Yeah, it is. It's curative, right? That's why I'm doing it. And then go for dinner. And, so it's a bit like a holiday. If I wasn't having treatment for lung cancer, I'd consider it a holiday. So, what I'm hoping, I guess, if I'm allowed to be hopeful, is to get this done and get some time and see it develop into a better drug. And perhaps it's a lifesaver at the end of the road. You never know what is and what isn't, right?
Helen Kelly on the phone from Cuba a couple of hours ago. The Christchurch City Council has been slammed for not removing sea level rise warnings from property reports. A peer review of a report that saw the warnings placed there in 2015 recommended they be removed immediately. But our Christchurch local government reporter, Conan Young, reports the council says it needs more time.
The warnings on land information memorandums, or LIMs, apply to 18,000 properties deemed vulnerable to flooding and a further 6,000 classed as vulnerable to erosion due to sea level rise caused by climate change. An independent peer review says parts of the original report are inaccurate, and until they can be amended, the warnings should be removed. Today, councillors voted in favour of putting this off for 4 weeks, while yet another report is completed. The council's chief executive, Carleen Edwards, said removing the warnings was no simple matter.
So there's recommendations in the report, peer review. There is advice as well, which aren't actually recommendations but suggestions. There's a statutory requirements and there's the other information that I have. And I would have thought you might be interested in terms of what I might amend the notations to be.
The Coastal Residents United group is pushing for the warnings to be removed. After today's decision, a spokesperson, Tim Sinters, said having them on the limb reports was having a huge impact on residents.
The last year we've had cases where houses can't sell, insurance has become an issue, no insurance, no mortgage, so it's a big impact and it's really affected a lot of people.
Another spokesperson for affected residents, Daryl Latham, says the warnings could have been removed by the chief executive immediately, and he worries about her motivations for delaying the move.
So we suspect that something else may be afoot and that the CEO is looking for a way to divert around this that might be more palatable for council, less palatable for the community.
Daryl Latham had this warning for the council if it didn't follow through on the recommendations of the peer review and bin the limbs.
We don't want to move to a situation where we're going to have to consider legal action, and that may be a very real possibility unless the CEO comes back with something that we perceive as being more palatable.
After being told the final decision to remove the warnings was over to the chief executive, city councillors voted unanimously in favour of the delay. However, many, including Coastal Ward councillor David East, did so begrudgingly and questioned the rationale behind mapping the risks posed by sea level rise.
I'm always mindful of the Parliamentary Commissioner's approach to climate change, that we have plenty of time to adjust to sea level rise and need to plan ahead in a realistic time frame, responding to actual change in sea level rather than reacting now to something computer modelling may indicate could happen in 100 years' time.
The council's chief executive will be back before councillors in a month with a final decision on whether the warnings will be removed and a time frame for when a new coastal hazards map will be drawn up. In Ototahi, ko Conan Young tēnei.
Brexit's strongest advocate, the outgoing UKIP leader Nigel Farage, has urged Republican voters in the US to get your walking boots on and drum up support for Donald Trump. Mr Farage appeared before 15,000 activists in Jackson, Mississippi, being introduced by and sharing the stage with Donald Trump. Trump's comparing his campaign to the Brexit campaign brilliantly run by Farage, that's a quote by the way, which pushed David Cameron for the Brexit vote.
Working people and the great people of the UK took control of their destiny. The people profiting from the rigged system, and it is rigged. We're finding it out every single day. The multinational banks, the media celebrities, the big donors, tried to scare the British people out of voting for change. The same thing is happening right here in the United States. It's happening.
Mr Farage says he's not endorsing Donald Trump, but he wants to show the American voters how to beat the establishment.
I think that you have a fantastic opportunity here with this campaign. You can go out. You can beat the pollsters. You can beat the commentators. You can beat Washington. And you'll do it by doing what we did for Brexit in Britain. We had our own people's army of ordinary citizens who went out and delivered leaflets, who went to meet people where they worked and where they socialised, who convinced and inspired people to go out, if this was the one and only time in their life, and to vote for change. So my advice to you, if you want change in this country, you better get your walking boots on, you better get out there campaigning. And remember, anything is possible if enough decent people are prepared to stand up against the establishment. Thank you very much indeed.
Nigel Farage in the US. Let's return now to Havelock North's water crisis. The letter that we covered earlier from the Hawke's Bay Regional Council to the Hastings District Council, formally stating it's undertaking an investigation into those bores in Havelock North. Now, using the phrase very concerned, the letter stated the council has information indicating the Brookvale bores, quote, may be in breach of consents and conditions. What does all of this mean, and what does the District Council think, having received that letter? Well, we asked Hastings District Mayor Lawrence Yule to join us, and he's joining us. Welcome back to Checkpoint, Mayor Yule.
Evening, John.
Evening, nice to talk to you again. You have received this letter from the Hawke's Bay Regional Council?
Yeah, I've seen it this morning. Yes.
Okay, what's your response to it?
Well, I'm surprised by it, to be fair. You know, we sort of received a phone call 1 minute and the letter was delivered to us 2 minutes later. So we were somewhat surprised. I mean, the information really is not that compelling or necessarily that new, in that we commissioned this work ourselves. This is what we do every 5 years to test the age of the water to make sure it satisfies the secure status.
Okay, have you tested the age of the water since the outbreak in Havelock North?
No. We'd organised this testing before that, and we had actually arranged for GNS Science to come today to test the water again.
Why haven't you tested it? Because isn't that material? If it's young water, if it's new water, then that tells you it's come from the surface, and that tells you where the fecal contamination was. Surely.
No. Let's be clear. We don't know whether the bug and the contamination is in the aquifer or in the well.
Well, you don't know that because you haven't done the test.
No, we have. We've tested the water 5 years ago. That is what we do every 5 years. We decided as another methodology.
Sorry, you've been very good, and you've come on Checkpoint every time we've asked you, and full marks for fronting. But this is just sounding a bit disingenuous. 5 years ago was not material. Now is material.
No, hang on.
Have you put cameras down the bores? Have you looked for other sources of water? Have you looked for surface water contamination? Have you looked for shallow groundwater contamination? If not, why not?
Yes, we have.
When?
And we've been doing all of that stuff. So we commissioned work in May to look at the age of the water. Well before this, so that work has only just been completed. This is a draft report which will take another 3 weeks to be completed. And it talks about one of those two wells having a potential issue. The other well is secure, even though the other well is still testing positive to E. coli. So we have done a whole lot of work around these bore fields to try and say, is it in the water, as in the aquifer? It is shallow, and we have done that with the Hawke's Bay Regional Council.
Have you put cameras down? Have you put cameras down the bores?
I can't answer that. I don't think we certainly haven't put cameras down the two Brookvale bores because they are still being used to supply. Well, they were until last night being used to supply water to Havelock North.
Okay, and have you got any results from any recent tests that show if there's new water? And why this is material is because it takes a long time for the water to come up from the aquifer, but very little time from contaminated surface water to go down. So new water is problematic, and it shouldn't be there according to your resource consent. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's I'm not sure it's a resource consent issue. It's a New Zealand drinking water standard issue. You're not allowed a certain percentage of new water.
Right. Is there new water? Is there new water in that bore?
Well, there appears to be in bore. I think it's bore 1. I haven't got it in front of me. In bore 1, they're saying there appears to be, but it's a draft report, and they need another 3 weeks to fully analyse.
Right. So wait a sec. This is new, isn't it? I don't think I've heard this before. There appears to be new water in bore 1.
There appears in a draft report, and they won't give us a final report for 3 weeks. That's what they're working on. But because of what happened in with the contamination, they decided to send us this early. We would normally not get this. They decided to send it early to try and be helpful. It's still draft. It is not conclusive, and they say that at this point.
You know what? It looks a little bit to me like, if the regional council is able to say it's the bore, then that gets them off the hook for all sorts of broader issues about contamination elsewhere, right? Up in Papa Nui, in the Tuki, all those big discussions about dairy runoff elsewhere, the feedlots, the feed pads, all of that kind of stuff. If you say, we don't know, we haven't done the test, it gets you off the hook in terms of whether there is surface water runoff. And both of you look like you're desperately trying to avoid the buck. Am I being unfair?
No, I think you're actually being unfair on us. I mean, I can't speak for the regional council. I've been straight up right from the beginning. We need to get to the bottom of this. We've been working with the regional council. We don't know how this has occurred to this point. But you've got to ask the question, is the regional council the right body to be investigating our bores? Because if it's not our bores, it's their aquifer, which they're responsible for.
Right, answer
so
that question
for me.
That seems a fair question for you to ask. Can you answer it? You clearly think that's not the case.
I can't, and we're getting further advice on that. And I think the shame of all of this is that as of yesterday, we were working jointly together in harmony to try and get to the bottom of this, and today they've decided that actually they'll launch an investigation on our bores. Now, as I talk to you tonight, I have no idea whether in fact we have two bores that are simultaneously failing, according to them, or the aquifer actually has E. coli in it and Campylobacter.
Is the Regional Council the right organisation to be doing this investigation?
Well, our view is not now, because they are potentially, they are responsible for the aquifer and the quality of the groundwater and the issuing of all the consents. So how can they objectively test our bores when they have a vested interest in proving that's either us or not them?
Okay, one final question. Are you making some form of announcement tomorrow? And if so, can you let us into what it is generally?
It's generally, it's how we sort of try to make right financially what's happened in Havelock.
And that's businesses, is it? That's businesses.
It's business and wider,
Okay.
but I don't want to say anything more. We're announcing it tomorrow.
Fair enough. Lawrence Yuill, thanks for joining us as always. We appreciate your time. It's 4 minutes to 6. There's more at stake than the Bledisloe Cup for the Australian rugby team this weekend. They head into Saturday's Rugby Championship match against the All Blacks in Wellington with the task of trying to return some pride to the Wallaby jersey, having lost 5 games in a row, 4 of those on home soil. Woo. So, can the Aussies turn things around and beat the New Zealand team at home in NZ for the first time in 15 years? Sports reporter Denise Garland analyses their chances.
9.5 months ago, the Wallabies were Rugby World Cup finalists, the second best team in the world. They lost to the All Blacks, and they've kept losing since. England secured their first ever series win on Australian soil with a 3-0 whitewash in June. And last weekend, they were embarrassed 42-8 by the All Blacks in Sydney, a 34-point defeat at home. So what's gone wrong? The former Wallaby, Peter Fitzsimons, says he thinks it was the World Cup performance that was the anomaly.
It's starting to look like that extraordinary effort in the World Cup was something of an aberration. That, we were hovering 4th or 5th in the world and then suddenly rose up for one mighty swipe to get to the World Cup final, to be number 2 in the world, and have since drifted back to 4th or 5th in the world at best. But one thing is certain, the performance last Saturday night was absolutely unacceptable.
The Wallabies coach Michael Cheika admits his side wasn't up to standard last weekend.
The reality is that the Australian team didn't play well that day. You know, since I've been here, you know, we've always, win or loss, we've always been, you know, pretty true to our identity. And that's the first time I don't think that we have.
Cheika says trying to turn around the team's fortunes against New Zealand is probably the biggest challenge of his career. The All Blacks coach Steve Hansen says there's another way of looking at it, that all the criticism will drive the Australians to prove their critics wrong.
They're a very proud side and determined side, so I'd expect after what they've been cropping in the media and their own thought processes that they'll turn up ready to rock and roll, and also mentally I think they'll be razor sharp and bring everything they've got.
But is everything they've got enough to beat the All Blacks in New Zealand for the first time in 15 years? Peter Fitzsimons says yes, but it'll be tough.
For me, this game is very simple. Stop them and then see if we can build a victory from there. But what we do know is if you don't stop them, you're going to be on the end of a 50-point hiding like we were last Saturday night.
The Wallabies have been all but written off by the bookies, and while the All Blacks are cautious about playing a wounded Wallaby side, there's no doubt it'll take a mighty effort to pull the Bledisloe Cup from their grasp this weekend. In Wellington for Checkpoint, called Denise Garland, Tēnei.
It's coming up to 6 o'clock, 1 minute before 6. Thank you for your feedback this evening. This is from John in Napier. Why don't the Hawke's Bay Regional Council already know whether the bore is compliant? This furthers the impression that the Hawke's Bay Regional Council has been too focused on development, i.e. the Ruitaniwha Dam, and negligent when it comes to protecting the resources which are the source of our health and wealth. Now, this is really confusing if you live outside the area because the District Council and the Regional Council sound so similar. So the District Council is in charge of the bores in Havelock North. They're their bores. But the Regional Council is in charge of water in the bigger area, consents, and also the Regional Council are increasingly standing accused by people like Dr. Russell Death, who were on Checkpoint the other night, of being tardy in their policing of farm runoffs, dairy spill, intensive farming pollution, that kind of stuff. So, 2 councils, lots of water, lots of confusion. Kia ora everyone, you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National, on the radio as always, but we're also screening live on Freeview Channel 50, streaming live on the RNZ website. Busy first hour tonight. Thank you for being with us. In the next 30 minutes, a Czech woman's alpine adventure turns into an absolute nightmare. The quake death toll in Italy rises to more than 240. Small towns prepare to take on a big bank. This is the story we've been covering about Westpac's branch closures and much more ahead. But first, here is the news with Katrina Batten.
Good evening, ngā mihi nui. A woman who survived in a hut on the Routeburn track for several weeks after her partner died was not able to walk out due to her injuries. The police, along with the Department of Conservation staff, have briefed media in Queenstown in the past hour about the rescue efforts of the woman who spent a month in the Lake Mackenzie hut. The Czech woman was rescued yesterday afternoon after she and her companion began walking the track on July the 26th. Her partner fell down a steep slope some days later and died. Inspector Olaf Jensen says the woman made the right decision to stay at the hut.
It's probably been unhelpful, some of the commentary about why she wasn't found. The fact is that no one had been through the hut that time, and given the severe weather conditions and her physical capability as a result of the ordeal, that she was not able to make it out, and made the right decision in staying put at the hut until rescue.
Inspector Olaf Jensen says attempts are still being made to retrieve the man's body. The Transport Accident Investigation Commission says it's concerning the cause of a fatal helicopter crash cannot be determined. The Commission has released a report into the crash of the Robinson R44 helicopter in February last year, which killed the pilot Stephen Combe and James Patterson Gardner. It says the main rotor blades struck the cabin in what's known as mast bumping, causing the helicopter to break up in the air. But investigators could not determine why the mast bumping occurred. There have been 14 such accidents involving Robinson since 1996. Commission spokesman Peter Williams says the manufacturer of the helicopter has updated its manual on how to fly the Robinsons, and the Civil Aviation Authority updated its rules about the make last year.
They are all useful and important steps, but it doesn't get around the fact that we have accidents happening where there are very experienced pilots, as in this case, who come to grief under these essentially unexplained circumstances.
Peter Williams from the Transport Accident Investigation Commission. More than 4,000 rescuers have searched through the night for survivors following the Italy earthquake. Many people are still believed to be buried under rubble, and rescuers are using heavy lifting equipment and bare hands to find them. Officials say at least 247 people have died and at least 368 were injured. Many of the victims were children, and there are warnings the toll could rise further. As a formal investigation is launched into the poisoning of more than 4,000 Havelock North people by contaminated water, the Hastings District Council says it still believes the town's water bores are secure. The Hawke's Bay Regional Council will look into whether the town's water bores were not sealed properly and allowed contaminated water to enter the aquifer. The Regional Council says well samples suggest surface water has somehow infiltrated the town's water supply. The District Council's Chief Executive, Ross McLeod, says he welcomes independent scrutiny of the bores to make sure they are compliant. But he says the bores have been up to standard in previous inspections, and the Council remains confident contaminated water did not enter the aquifer via the bore casings. Parliament has passed legislation that will make it legal for shops to trade on Easter Sunday if their local councils agree. The country's Easter trading laws have been a source of great frustration, with some tourist centres being allowed to trade and others not. This afternoon, MPs voted 62 to 59 in favour of the law change. The Workplace Relations Minister, Michael Woodhouse, says the current shop trading exemptions are outdated. He told Parliament a large and growing number of events were being scheduled over Easter, such as Warbirds over Wanaka.
This event draws large crowds from New Zealand and around the world. The inability to even have a choice about doing a bit of shopping around these events is outdated and out of line with the choices people want to be able to make.
Michael Woodhouse says it will now be up to local communities whether they open on Easter Sunday. The High Court has overturned the Corrections Department's decision to stop a reporter from recording a meeting between convicted double murderer Scott Watson and the father of one of his victims. Gerald Hope's daughter, Olivia Hope, was one of two people Watson is convicted over killing in 1998. The department had said journalist Mike White could take part in the meeting as a facilitator, but not as a journalist. Watson sought a judicial review of that decision. In her decision today, Justice Mellon quashed Corrections' decision and directed it to reconsider. The judge said Corrections did not seem to have considered the practicalities of granting permission for Mr Hope to visit Watson and for Mr White to be present, but not in his capacity as a journalist. She said Corrections failed to show any justification for interfering with freedom of expression. In sport, the All Blacks coach Steve Hansen is hoping Israel Dagg can make the switch from fullback to wing with ease, as it would give the side more selection options. The move means Ben Smith returns to fullback for Saturday's clash against Australia in Wellington. If the All Blacks win, their dominance in the Bledisloe Cup will be extended to 14 years. Hansen says Smith and Dagg are both world-class fullbacks, but he wants to know if the latter can play well out wide.
We've seen the combination round the other way working well, and we think Ben's certainly a world-class winger. We need to find out if Izzy can start a test there and do a job for us, because it opens up further down the track other selection possibilities. It may well also allow Ben to come into the game a wee bit more if Australia are going to kick, which I think they probably will do a bit more.
The All Blacks have thrust debutant 21-year-old Anton Leonard-Brown into the starting side to face what Hansen believes will be a Wallabies team intent on revenge. Meanwhile, Australia's under-fire coach Michael Cheika has restored Quade Cooper to the lineup for Saturday's test. He gets the nod ahead of the Waratahs playmaker Bernard Foley, who was given the number 12 jersey, replacing the injured Matt Giteau. That's the news.
Tonight on Night's the third and final instalment of Sonia Sly's series on Auckland Fashion Week. This week's cultural ambassador, Adrian Kinnaird, celebrates Terry Teo, the country's most successful comic book character since Murray Ball created Footrot Flats, and Our Changing World finds out how squid glow in the dark while finding a suburban home for some little blue penguin. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow for the North Island. Periods of rain with some heavy falls in the north, easing in most places tomorrow. Strong or gale northwesterlies north of Hamilton at times. Nelson, Buller, Marlborough and Canterbury, mostly cloudy, rain developing tomorrow morning, persistent in the east. Westland and Fiordland, remaining areas of rain clearing, however rain developing north of the glaciers tomorrow. For Otago and Southland, find it first apart from some rain about the coastal Otago. Areas of fog tonight and tomorrow morning, rain spreading inland tomorrow afternoon or evening with snow to 800 metres in central Otago. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy with rain developing tomorrow morning. It's just gone 6:08.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. A Czech woman who was trapped in a remote hut on the Routeburn track for nearly a month after her companion died on what was supposed to be a 3-day tramp was discovered yesterday after the Czech consulate raised concerns with the police. Police say the pair in their late 20s or early 30s set off on July 26, but 2 days into their tramp, the man fell to his death. The woman spent 3 nights alone in the bush before breaking into Mackenzie Hut. We heard about Mackenzie Hut earlier in the program. The Department of Conservation's Wakatipu operations manager, Jeff Owen, praised the woman's actions.
As far as I'm aware, she's forced entry into. We have wardens' huts across the Routeburn. They're there for our summer wardens, which is October to April of any given year. And during the winter, we winterise the track, which means we put out avalanche signs, we close our own huts up. We leave the public huts open because we do know that there are people who still are capable of walking through the winter months. So, yeah, she would have forced the hut. And good on her for making that decision.
What were the kind of supplies in the hut, do you know?
Generally, we don't leave too much there, but there would have been heating available to her. There would have been some other resources just to keep her warm. Our wardens may or may not have left food behind. We don't encourage food to be left up on the tracks over the winter months, simply just because of the rodent issue. But fortunate too for her, she was in an area where Ultimate Hikes operate a lodge, and I think that was a bit more resourced than our particular hut. And my understanding, she may have made access to that as well. So again, for all the commentary and given the time that she's out there, you'd have to say her last decision was a very good decision, to just hunker down and wait for somebody to come along.
And that's exactly what she did. That's the Department of Conservation's Wakatipu Operations Manager Jeff Owen. Our reporter Ian Telford joins us from outside the Queenstown Police Station. Ian, all sorts of speculation about what's happened and why and how this woman could simply disappear, not be found for such a long period. Is there anything else that you have learnt this afternoon?
Yes, that's right, John. A lot of talk, isn't there, about the possibility of her staying in that hut for 24 days and not being found. And yet, and we're hearing that from all kinds of people, that is exactly possibly what has happened here. The police are adamant that she was not contacted, that no one came through that area, even though that track is popular in summer. It appears that in winter, and particularly conditions like now, where there's up to, they say, 3 feet of snow, people just simply don't go through. In fact, some people who are experienced trampers in that area told me this afternoon anyone who knows that backcountry wouldn't go there because of the avalanche risk and the risk of falling. So therefore, and that's why DOC puts out its warnings. So it does seem that a lot of local people and New Zealanders and maybe even tourists have been avoiding it, not able to get up that far, not getting to that particular hut, even though that's on parts of the Rootburn track, and that she indeed wasn't seen for 24 days. Yes, it does seem extraordinary, but at the moment, no evidence that in any way her story is wrong.
Yeah, we're receiving a lot of feedback from people who know the Rootburn who say, fantastic over summer, don't go anywhere near it over winter for precisely the reasons you describe, and it has been ferociously cold and snowing heavily during this period. What about the police recovery operation, Ian? What more can you tell us about that?
Yes, we're waiting to hear, John. They are attempting that rescue right now, recovery of the woman's companion. We don't know exactly much about him. We know that he was either in his late 20s to early 30s, that it's not quite clear their relationship, but they were clearly tramping together. They're both Czech, and that he fell just 2 days now, we've learned, after they entered into this area. She then was able to go off and break into this hut and stay there for 24 days. The police are back up there now. Apparently the helicopter is attempting to recover the man's body. No word on that yet, John, and they are attempting to do it clearly while there's still light. You can see, I think, in the pictures that there's still some light here, although it's falling fairly fast. So if they don't get it out in the next hour or so, I suppose they may have to wait until the morning. So we're waiting to hear. We may well get an update on that this evening.
Ian Telford live from outside the Queenstown Police Station. Thanks, Ian. Nice to talk to you. The death toll following the earthquake that rocked central Italy has risen to more than 240 now. Rescuers working through the night in an attempt to find more survivors under the rubble, but often they are finding bodies instead. The strong quake razed homes and buckled roads in a cluster of mountain communities east of Rome. Very old buildings, many of them dating back to medieval times, falling simply on top of people who were asleep in their beds. The BBC's Damien Grammaticus made it to the tiny village of Pescara del Tronto.
Pescara del Tronto, razed to the ground in just 20 seconds. Perched on a mountain ridge, it had been built here up high hundreds of years ago for safety. But today that was its undoing when the earthquake struck. The houses of ancient stone and wood came crashing down the hillside. As rescue teams poured into the area today, they faced a mammoth task. Under all that rubble, the sniffer dogs found something this afternoon. But no earth-moving equipment could make it up here, so they dug by hand. Here to help was Marco Palatroni. He'd come with his friends from a local rugby team. He lives down the valley and was woken by the tremors.
I see my mother screaming and my father the same. After 2 minutes, me and my family go out of the house and goes in the car, like all the people in the city. And we go in the big park in the city. We're not building around.
As they searched the ruins of Pescara, the ground kept shaking.
Building went down during our work. For example, there was one building like that. Now it's...
It fell down while you were working?
Yes. I went there inside before it fell down.
And complicating things further, Pescara is full of holiday homes. People come in the summer, a refuge from the heat, so nobody knows how many lie buried here. Well, this is the third body we've seen being brought out from this spot just in the last few minutes. What the rescue teams, of course, hope is that they will find people alive, but looking at where the buildings have just fallen down this hillside, it's hard to believe that anyone can still survive under there. Back at the digging, as they got closer, they realised it wasn't a survivor, but somebody's pet trapped here. And eventually they prized the dog free. The final toll in this one village, maybe 20 people dead, maybe more. But the truth is that today, Pescara del Tronto, population 100, was wiped from the map.
There has been, as we've discussed earlier with Giles on Checkpoint, some relief for debt-laden dairy farmers after Fonterra raised its forecast payout. The dairy processor and exporter lifted its payout for the current season by 50 cents to $4.75 a kilo of milk solids due to a jump in global dairy prices. Our economics correspondent, Patrick O'Mara, reports.
Milk prices have jumped by more than 20% in the last two dairy auctions, boosting Fonterra's forecast payout. A former share milker of the year, John O'Bavin, says while it will take time for the benefit of the increased payout to flow through, it's a shot in the arm for struggling farmers.
It's just an added bonus, and it just makes things a little bit easier when you're talking to your banks and accountants and stuff like that. Going forward, it's definitely going to be a lot easier in the next 6 to 8 months.
The chair of the Fonterra Shareholders Council, Duncan Cool, says it's also a boost for dairy regions.
I think it will be a confidence booster for all. Not only banks, but I know in my own little town of Otrahonga, there are a lot of little businesses in our town that have really suffered the last 2 years, given the drop-off in spending too. So I hope it will give some confidence to some of our rural communities as well.
The increase, plus a 50 to 60 cent dividend, will take many farmers close to break even. But Federated Farmers Dairy Industry spokesperson Andrew Hoggard doesn't expect farmers to relax just yet. He points out that previous global dairy trade auction price surges proved short-lived.
We've had a couple of good GDT results. Definitely the trajectory looks good, but as happened last year, we had some good GDT results and the payout also got lifted, but then it came back down again.
The acting chief economist at Westpac, Michael Gordon, says while global milk production has fallen in recent months in response to low prices, it remains high.
That process of the market adjusting to the new level of prices, it is happening, but it needs to go a lot further, I think, before we really see prices settle down at something sustainable again.
Nevertheless, analysts, including Mr Gordon, are optimistic the worst is over. Most are picking a milk price of more than $5 a kilo, with some thinking it'll settle close to $6 by season's end next May. For Checkpoint, Patrick O'Mara.
The people of Ramfurly in central Otago, of course, are preparing for a fight. They're rallying together to oppose Westpac's plans to close the town's only bank. Westpac is consulting on a proposal to close 19 bank branches across the country. Protests are scheduled tomorrow, including in Ranfurly. I suspect there wouldn't be terribly many protests in Ranfurly. Let's ask Central Otago Mayor Tony Lepper, who's getting his banner ready to take a stand and is joining us on the phone now from Clyde. Welcome back to Checkpoint, Mayor Lepper. It's nice to talk to you again.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, no, we are getting ready for today, tomorrow's day of action at the Westpac branch in Ranfurly.
So look, you've been on Checkpoint before and we've discussed this before, so forgive me for asking you to repeat yourself, but for people listening the first time, if the Westpac Bank goes in Ranfurly, the nearest bank is in Alexandra, how far away is that?
That's 90 kilometres, and as I got reminded by the residents of Ranfurly, that's an 880-kilometre round trip to bank a $10 cheque, as they told me.
An 180k round trip? Yeah. Okay. And more than that, it puts pressure on Ranfurly in terms of people's ability to hold cash. You're on the rail trail there, aren't you, in Ranfurly?
Yeah, we're on the rail trail, and apparently there is a hang of a lot of Australians using that rail trail And there is a one of those private cash machines in Ranfurly, and it won't handle foreign cards, so that's no good to anyone.
Okay, so what's going to happen tomorrow? There's going to be a protest when and where? In downtown Ranfurly, outside the Westpac Bank, is it?
Yeah, it is. 1 o'clock, it's an hour or so of protesting. We had 100 people at our public meeting last Friday. I'm predicting they'll have 300 or 400 at this protest day. So it'll be interesting to see what Westpac's reaction is. We haven't been able to meet with Westpac yet. They keep saying we prefer all your submissions to be in writing so that we can consider them along with the others. So we haven't been able to talk to Westpac, so we're getting very little feedback out of them.
Right, that's from head office. You know the regional chap down there, don't you, I think? Okay. So, but obviously he doesn't have any influence over this. So you've gone to head office and said, we'd like to meet with you. In fact, didn't you suggest that you could make a council building available to them to maintain some kind of presence in the town?
Yeah, John, that's what we have done. That's the first line of attack. The people of Ranfurly want to really keep that branch, and we're getting them behind that as a council. But we're also making, in our submissions, we're saying to Westpac, look, if you could possibly consider an alternative service using our building, our staff, we're there, we're available, and we're ready to help. But in the meantime, our first priority is to try and keep the branch.
Yeah. When was there last a protest in Ranfurly? Do you remember?
No, I can't remember at all, John.
And what's the population of the town, roughly? Sorry to spring that question on you.
Oh, no problems at all. 300 or 400 people, I think we'll probably have them all there.
So on a per capita basis, 300 or 400 people in a town of 300 or 400 people is equivalent to getting 1.4 million at a protest in Auckland.
Exactly, John.
Bloody good effort, Ranfurly, eh?
Yeah. And that's the sort of people that they are. The passion at the meeting last week was unbelievable, and you've got to expect that in Ranfurly. They will get all sorts of people along there tomorrow, and they'll get those farmers from the hinterland. And that's one of the problems. The farmers are good supporters of Westpac, but that's channeled through Dunedin, so it doesn't show up in that local branch's records.
Okay, and people are turning up on their tractors, we hear, Tony.
Tractors, sheep, I'm hearing it'll be a novel Ranfurly protest.
Wow, okay, we'll try and get a camera to it. Thanks, Tony. Lovely to talk to you. Tony Lepper, who is the Mayor of Central Otago, which does, of course, include Ranfurly. My suspicion is it's one of the biggest mayoralties by square kilometrage in the country. Let's go to Australia. Protesters at Parliament have called on the government New Zealand. Protesters at Parliament have called on the government to step up more to forcefully oppose Australia's use of offshore detention camps. They say the government's indifference to what's happening there is absolutely inexcusable. Our political reporter Benedict Collins was there.
Around 100 people were protesting Australia's offshore detention camps where asylum seekers and New Zealanders facing deportation are held. Organiser Emma Cullen from Peace Action Wellington wants the government to put some real pressure on Australia.
People coming, seeking refuge, fleeing from persecution shouldn't be put in detention centres. New Zealanders in Australia shouldn't be put in their detention centres.
The Labour MP Calvin Davis says Australia uses offshore detention camps so they can be hidden from the public. He's ashamed about what he says is the lack of opposition from the government.
If you're silent in the face of tyranny, then you're on the side of the tyrant, and our New Zealand government's silence in the face of what's going on in the offshore detention centres shows that we're on the side of the tyrant, and that being the Australian government.
The Green MP Denise Roach is appalled at what Australia is doing.
It's an inhumane approach to what is actually a dire human rights situation. People are seeking asylum and they're being treated appallingly and abused while they're seeking asylum. They're not illegal. It's a basic human right to seek asylum.
One of those at the demonstration, Sue Ryan, a secondary school principal on Kiribati, says for her, the problem isn't political.
And I feel very concerned about the children of those refugees. My prime concern is their education, that they're growing up without any.
The Deputy Prime Minister Bill English says Australia makes its own rules and that the government has expressed its concerns about New Zealanders being held in detention.
Australia makes their own rules. We can't make their policy, so we need to work by a process of influence.
Earlier this month, the Australian government announced it would close its Manus Island detention camp. However, several others remain. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Benedict Collins.
24 minutes past 6 on Checkpoint. Fans of Grey's Anatomy, eat your heart out. Not entirely sure that is an appropriate phrase, but anyway, in a first of its kind for New Zealand, a mock hospital ward complete with real doctors, nurses and patients is operating in a warehouse in an industrial Christchurch neighbourhood. A steady stream of visitors is beating a path to the door of the Canterbury District Health Board's world-leading design lab, including our reporter Rachel Graham.
Last week, the new $215 million Burwood Hospital opened in Christchurch, one part of an almost $1 billion construction project being undertaken around the region by the Canterbury District Health Board. But even before the new rooms were built at Burwood Hospital, they'd already been tested out in the design lab by medical staff and patients to see how they would work. Richard Hamilton, the Health Board's development manager, says that was just as well, as significant errors were found.
Issues about where the hoists are mounted in the ceiling, so rectifying that, how hoists and doorways work together, curtains and hoists are biggie, where the sinks were located relative to beds. So lots of little details that when you're looking at a plan or when you're playing around with this cardboard, you just don't quite see those final details. So it was an opportunity to rectify all of those before we actually fitted out hundreds of rooms.
Richard Hamilton says over the last 3 years, the design lab has been used to gather information about what people want from the new facilities and how they will actually function. Once a plan is drawn up, it's built first in a rough form in cardboard, then heavier duty cardboard, and finally a real-life build using the actual materials. The Chief Executive of the Canterbury District Health Board, David Mates, says this process actually saves time and money in the long run.
It's actually made it a lot quicker and ultimately cheaper, because when you get to constructing it, it's already been designed, and therefore the ability to create or make errors in construction are reduced significantly.
The day RNZ News stopped by, a group of theatre nurses was visiting the design lab to check out what their theatres will look like in the new acute services building, which is currently under construction. Mary Laurie, the perioperative nurse manager, says her team was getting a proper run-through of how the operating theatres might work and pointing out any problems which might arise.
We were looking on the plans and we had our linen and rubbish bins tucked around the corner, and as soon as we put them there today we realised we couldn't get access through to the door very well. So luckily that's a mobile thing, so we're going, right, well they can't live there then. So just some things as simple as that.
Richard Hamilton says the design lab has also been working on an innovative new layout for wards, which will create multi-bed wards with the advantages of a single bedroom. He says many patients like the companionship of multi-bed rooms, but don't like the loss of privacy. The new hybrid ward has 4 beds in a long room, with each having their own glass door.
There's a lot of interest around the world with what we're doing, because effectively what we've created is every bed has its own access way, which means every family can go in and just go to their own family member. There is a clinical side, there's a family side, so everything's organised in that environment, and we've effectively created a single room inside of a multi-bedded space.
Mr Hamilton says the lab has also hosted other health boards, the fire service, St John and schools, along with visitors from as far away as Europe. Given the level of interest, the design lab looks set to continue to be a bustling hospital ward for many years to come. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Rachel Graham.
Almost at the end of Checkpoint, we've got a great piece of feedback coming up. But first, the recipient of one of the world's most expensive face transplants says he's feeling great 1 year after undergoing the groundbreaking surgery. Mississippi firefighter Patrick Hardison, whose face was burned off when the roof of a home collapsed on top of him 15 years ago, says he's off his feeding tubes and his vision has improved.
I'm here today because I want others to see that there is hope beyond the injury. I am especially proud to share my story with other injured firefighters, first responders, as well as U.S. military. I'm happy to tell you I'm doing great. I like to say that I'm the same old Pat, but that would not give enough credit to the amazing journey I have gone through over the past year. The road to recovery has been long and hard, but if I had the opportunity to do it again, I would in a heartbeat. I've had some follow-up surgeries, including surgery to remove my feeding tube and breathing tubes, which I no longer need. In fact, my family and I took a trip to Disney World this past June, and I swam in the pool with my children for the first time in 15 years. No more stares from strangers. I'm pretty much back to being a normal guy doing normal activities. My life has changed and it has been renewed. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to provide this update to you all. Thank you.
Gosh, I was just watching that. If you were listening, you won't realise quite how remarkable that surgery was. It's complete and utter metamorphosis. We're going to end tonight with some feedback from Judith, and it echoes a lot of the feedback that we are getting around the issue of responsibility for the water situation in Hawke's Bay. John, the government rushed a commissioner into place in Christchurch to run the regional council, no problem. Why are they not doing the same quick smart in Hawke's Bay, resorting out the water pollution cause? The government believes in hands-off to suit their agenda. Lots of people questioning where the government is in Hawke's Bay. Thank you for all of your feedback. We appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. An injured Czech tramper stayed in a snowbound hut for more than 3 weeks after her companion's death on the Routeburn track. The Transport Accident Investigation Commission says it's concerning the cause of a fatal helicopter crash cannot be determined. Rescuers race to find survivors of the Italian quake, with many people still missing. MPs have passed legislation making it legal for shops to trade on Easter Sunday if their local councils agree. The mother of murdered Rotorua girl Nia Glassy has been recalled to prison for breaching parole. And a judge has overturned corrections decision to stop a reporter recording a meeting between convicted double murderer Scott Watson and the father of one of his victims. Our next news and weather is at 7.
This Saturday morning, I'm broadcasting from Christchurch, which is hosting its Readers and Writers Festival. I'll be